Hello everyone, Walter Bowne here. Let's talk about Edith Wharton. She was born in 1862 on the west side, 23rd Street in New York City. She lived through 1937, so she was born during the Civil War and died right before World War II. So her life covers what we now know as the Gilded Age and America's emergence as a world leader. She was, in a way, one of the American aristocracy. Astor had this list of 400 Americans who were like the most influential Americans. So if we know anything from the Age of Innocence, we know it's all about the upper class of America who inhabited New York City, Newport, Rhode Island, Lenox, Massachusetts, and had estates all over the country. And we're talking about the Morgans, the Vanderbilts, these types of people. All right, she won the Pulitzer Prize in 1921 for her novel The Age of Innocence. She was the first woman to receive that prize. The other person that was up for the nomination was Sinclair Lewis for his other satire, Main Street. Both Age of Innocence and Main Street are satires. But the head of the council overturned, and it went to Edith Wharton. She was born to wealth. In fact, her father, George Frederick Jones, it's where we get the term keeping up with the Joneses. The idea that you have to, if your neighbor gets a Lexus, you have to get a Lexus, or you have to get a Lamborghini. You always have to keep up. Your neighbor gets a pool, you need a pool. That's perhaps a bigger pool. So it was the kind of like, you need to keep up the appearances and you need to keep up with your neighbors in order to stay in their good graces. Right. She started writing, really. She's always loved to write. And when she was 15, she wrote a 30,000 word novel called Fast and Loose, which one of the directors at the house said it was neither fast nor loose. But it just showed her propensity at such a young age to write. In 1880, she had 5 poems published in the Atlantic Monthly, and she had no formal education. She never went to school. She had nannies, but she spoke French, Italian, and German. Of course, wrote impeccable English, which goes to show that you don't necessarily need formal schooling to be intelligent and educated. All you need to do is have the propensity and the encouragement to learn. So we see in Edith Wharton, really, an Ellen Olenska from Age of Innocence. Of course, a woman who is creative, artistic, endowed with powers that her society does not appreciate or really recognize. And we can see, especially from a woman like Edith Wharton, women did not write. Women did not write in general, especially really upper-class women did not write. And in Age of Innocence, if we remember, Olenska lives in the unfashionable part of New York City among people who write. And Newland Archer can go there. He's a man. He appreciates it. But it's where Ellen finds herself most at home. And at least for Wharton, she had the time, she had the comfort level, the money in order to indulge in her writing. And over her life, she wrote, I believe, 40 different books. And it was every year of her life that was productive, she had a book published. When Edith Wharton came out for her debut, back in the old days, women would have a debut at a ball. And much like May, but she was 17 and not very attractive and not very sociable, just not the type of woman who would, feel comfortable coming out, socializing. But she eventually did marry this guy, Teddy Robbins Wharton, who was very unlike her. She was studious. She loved books. He was sociable, loved the outdoors. And in her memoir, A Backward Glance, guess how long? They were married for a while until he kind of went crazy and she got a divorce. There was about a paragraph written about this guy. So it was a marriage of convenience, of comfort, but not of love, definitely not of passion. And we'll talk about two of her romantic relationships throughout our study of The Age of Innocence, because it shows just how you have a marriage, yet you might have something on the side that makes you more fulfilled, even if it's illicit, and we'll talk about that. So let's take a visit to Edith Wharton's home called The Mount. She lived there about 10 years. She totally designed it. She loved, in fact, one of her first books was about how to furnish a home. She loved architecture, and she totally designed this house, with, of course, help with a couple architects. It's in the Berkshires in western Massachusetts. In fact, it's called sort of like the western or the mountain Newport. It's where all the rich. So if you go there today, there's so many gorgeous, huge homes dotting the landscape around Lenox and up and down the Berkshires. The Berkshires is a popular skiing resort. Also in the summer, it's known for Tanglewood and all the theater. So a lot of summer theater actors go to the Berkshires for theater. And a lot of canoeing, a lot of hiking. The Appalachian Trail runs through. That's a very popular place. And if you were to go to from Voorhees, you could see how long it would take you. It's about 230 some miles from Eastern to the Mount in western Massachusetts. So let's take a look at Edith Wharton's home here. This is the front of her house. It was unpretentious. If you wanted a good view, you had to be welcomed into the house. Here we have walking around the side of the house into her garden, which was very important to her as a place to unwind, walk. This is called the Lime Walk with the linden trees. And here's my lovely wife in her garden. Not Mary Jane's garden, but Edith Wharton's garden. Walking along the side of the house, you can see how beautifully ornate the house is. Here's our garden again. Secluded, you got the walls, the flowers. You can ask me what kind of flowers they are. And for Edith Wharton, who was a very, very private person, she did not like big, giant, large parties. She loved round tables because it was equal. And you could see people like Henry James would be here, a very famous American novelist. She didn't like large parties. She liked intimate settings of a few people. This is her library, which she would do all her writing in. She wrote in the morning in her pajamas, in bed, and her secretary would type out the drafts. All right, so what do we make out of Edith Wharton? And what does she write about? Well, she wrote about money, duty, outcasts, love, marriage, manners, choice, social class, American identity, emotional repression. Think about all the things that we might think this is all just about 1880, right? But think about how many times that you might not have the choice where you go to college, your major, who you marry, if you're Jewish, if you're Indian, if it's part of your culture to have to marry within that race or that culture or that religion. Right? She loved books, right? She said that books are the magic carpets, some of them to carry one to the other side of the room. Here are some of her, here are 40 of her first edition books. And she had this idea of the innermost room, where she did not write about happy endings. Her stories are all about the lost chance, right? And her characters all yearn for someone to join them in that innermost room, that person that can share the secrets and their deepest desires, like Ellen and Newland Archer. Women, a corset is a metaphor for women in this culture. They're restricted. Men force this corset on women to create this ideal body shape. It kills you. A woman can't breathe in this thing. So of course Edith Wharton writes in her pajamas, unencumbered by this awful corset, in bed, where she can actually be herself rather than just a figure of what men want her to be like and all women to be like. So we have to also talk about where does money come from, right? This is old wealth, guys. This is not where you go out, get educated, find a job, and make a lot of money. No, this money is handed down, inherited. And when we talk about old money in Great Gatsby, this is what we're talking about. All right, she had a long letter affair, correspondence with a guy named Walter Van Rensselaer Berry. If you know about the Rensselaers, the Rensselaer Institute or University up there in New York is very popular with engineers. But she's buried next to this guy in Versailles. So, and he burned all his letters, so there wasn't any evidence of their relationship. But again, was this guy someone who did share that innermost room? She probably didn't share that innermost room with her husband, much like Newland Archer could never, share that innermost room with May, who just wasn't capable of it. So her characters all yearn for someone to connect with, and when society says you can't connect with them. Okay, so Edith Wharton, in a way, puts her characters in these sort of like cages, where you feel restrained. Newland Archer's restrained. Ellen Olensa is restrained. All these characters feel restrained by society, whether it's family, social custom, rules, laws that dictate the behavior of women, laws that dictate just what should a marriage entail. And Edith Wharton talks about the truth and justice and things like that. Even if we don't want to hear the truth, even though we don't want to hear about justice, the silence will eventually reveal the truth. And it's reading books like Age of Innocence and other works like that, especially great satire like Age of Innocence, social satire, making fun of people who gossip, making fun of the Sillerton Jacksons, even his name Sillerton, right? He's silly. These are all people, or Manson Mignon, right? She's so large she can't go anywhere. Or the ultra snobs of the van der Luydens or van der Ludens, right? These are all comical portrayals of real, not sinister people, but in a way very sinister people. How they keep us in jails and how we might be able to get the keys to leave these jails that put us in. And we'll debate the ending of Age of Innocence because, of course, it is not a happy ending for Newland Archer. His son, very different story. Very different story, and we'll talk about that later.